Hello, everyone. This is Whitney Will from Star Hearth Astrology. Oh my gosh, Mercury is still in retrograde. I'm a double Virgo. I can't even talk. I'm here today to talk to you about the Gemini North Node eclipse, and I have my friend Emma here to do it with me as the most Gemini of all Geminis. I'm sure there's somebody who's more Gemini than Emma, but she has some pretty prominent Gemini placements. And so I thought we would have some kind of twinship energy in here and a bunch of Gemini. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. Emma and I have been friends for a long time, and she kind of fills all my knowledge gaps in the tarot world. And so she's gonna come on here today. I'm gonna talk about the eclipse, and then Emma is gonna do kind of a mini tarot session for us. So Emma, do you want to just introduce yourself and give people a little bit of your background before we hop in?
Yeah, totally. Like Whitney said, we've been friends for years. I am a Gemini sun and moon, which I have recently come to learn a lot about through Whitney's moon class. It's given me a lot of vocabulary around what that means. Because sometimes I don't feel like a Gemini. You know, like you see posts on Instagram that are like, this is a stereotypical Aries thing to do, you know, and I see the Gemini ones and I'm like, that is so not me. So being a Gemini balsamic moon, I realize there's like an introverted side to Gemini that nobody talks about, which is part of why I think we're doing this eclipse event together. I've been reading tarot for like 5 years now. I've been reading for other people for about 3. It's exciting and always different and kind of nerve-wracking because you never really know what you're going to pull. But I always find it super fulfilling. So I'm excited to be here and I'm like stoked to see what happens. And hopefully some people can join us for our event on Wednesday for more fun.
Yeah, that'll be great. Yeah, so Emma and I are both double mutables. I'm Virgo sun, Virgo moon. She's Gemini sun, Gemini moon. I'm a new moon. She's a balsamic. So at the very, very end of the lunar cycle. And so all of the wackiness of being a dark moon and the mutability, means that, the mercurial archetypes fly. And I've always had so much respect for Emma's understanding of the archetypes and the kind of nuance that she brings to her interpretations. So we're going to jump in. So let's talk about this eclipse that's coming up. It is a solar eclipse, which means it's happening on a new moon. And so the moon is going to pass in front of the sun. It's going to be happening very, very late at night. So the US is not going to be in the direct line of this eclipse in any way. It happens at 19 degrees of Gemini. So wherever that is in your chart, that is the place to do some astro sleuthing for kind of the storylines that it could bring. Now, this eclipse is one in a series of eclipses. So we've been in the Gemini and Sagittarius eclipse cycle for about a year now. Actually, exactly a year. We had our first Sagittarius eclipse on June 5th of 2020. And that was a South Node lunar eclipse. And so then we went all the way through and had our next kind of iteration of eclipses on November 30th and December 14th. We're now in eclipse season again, 5.5 months, 6 months after that. We just had our Sagittarius lunar eclipse on May 26th, and we're due for our Gemini solar eclipse on June 10th. So this Gemini solar eclipse is really significant in this cycle of eclipses because we only get one of them. So we're going to have 2 Sagittarius solar eclipses that happen on the South Node in the time when the nodes are in Gemini and Sagittarius, but we only get one on the North Node in Gemini. And so that means we only get one for 18 years until we get the North Node back in Gemini, but that's going to be 18 years from now. So what does that mean? I feel like I've spent a lot of time talking about the South Node in Sagittarius and shedding limiting belief systems about ourselves and shedding limiting belief systems in that area of our charts, which for me has shown up in my 11th house of friendships, of groups, of how I relate to community, but also my midheaven is in my 11th house, so has tied in some professional storylines as well. So for you, based on your rising sign, it can happen in any of the 12 houses, but looking for where you're kind of shedding these old versions of yourself in those spaces. Yeah, Emma, has that shown up for you? Where does that occur in your chart, and what are some of the storylines you're seeing?
Yeah, so again, Sun and Moon are both in Gemini, and they're around 11 degrees, so close to the eclipse, where the eclipse will hit. But that axis of Gemini and Sag are in my wow, 10th and 5th houses, right? 10 and 5.
5 and 11.
Opposite? 5 and 11. 5 and 11. Yes.
Yeah, which is kind of
So
confusing because they're in my 5 and 11 too. I'm an Aquarius rising. Emma is a Leo rising. So we have, using a whole sign house system, our charts are flipped. So we'll have things occurring like that. The axes are the same.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's been like a lot of, I think the theme between eclipse season in December and coming into this eclipse season has been a lot of like restructuring or like rehashing of friendships and kind of evaluating my relationship with myself, and almost this like return to like the idea of who I was as like not big enough, almost like a hermit crab, right? Like you suddenly realize that like what you're surrounding yourself with that was once like safe and familiar is not like big enough for you anymore, or like not as comfortable as it was supposed to be. So a lot of like reaching out and like touching things and figuring out like what's supposed to fit.
Yeah, I like that image, especially for Gemini, and thinking about coming into this North Node eclipse, because what we have, right? Eclipses are supercharged lunations. So a lunation is a full moon or a new moon. Eclipses kind of turn the volume all the way up on them. They also make it so there's a possibility that your speakers get blown out as well. So interpret that metaphorically however you want. They have the potential for volatility in eclipses. And so when Emma was talking about kind of reaching out and touching all of this new stuff, and that's what the North Node does. The North Node is insatiably hungry. And so we have the North Node moving through Gemini, and Gemini is kind of like, it's like all the options. Like Gemini is the candy store. And the North Node wants to try everything, and it's going to try everything and make itself sick a little bit. But when we have a new moon on the North Node, it's saying, okay, it's saying we're ready for new stories in this part of our chart. I want to reach out and touch everything. I want to see how it feels, especially in Gemini. I think Austin Coppock in the most recent forecast episode of the astrology podcast was discussing the idea that the North Node is exalted in Gemini, kind of because what the North Node does is gather things to it. And there is an kind of essential gathering quality to Gemini as well, of like, let's try everything. And a real playfulness there too. And Gemini is very playful, usually in a pretty cerebral way, but it's kind of like, let's turn this idea over and over in our mind and see where it gets us. And so right in the Gemini area of your chart, that's what we're looking for. And so another thing that's happening on the same day of this eclipse is that we have the sun conjoining Mercury, and Mercury is retrograde. So the same day as this eclipse, we have this event called a Kazimi, where a retrograde Mercury conjoins the sun. And what we get in that moment is this kind of moment of clarity in the middle of all the confusion of the retrograde. And so it's almost like in all of the chaos, you finally get the vision of like what this is all for, what it's all about. And I think the significance of that happening on an eclipse and on a North Node eclipse is that you kind of, there's this, right? Like what eclipses can do is change your direction really quickly, change your orientation really quickly. There's kind of like almost, like we talk about Uranus does, provides these flashes of insight, and suddenly you understand where you need to go. Um, and so I think, right, you, um, Mercury has been in all of this confusion, retrograde, square to Neptune. And so there's this moment of clarity, or the potential of clarity with these, with this eclipse. And then we've got kind of 6 months to figure out how to get from where we are now to there, or to, I almost feel like with eclipses, they end up feeling really fatey, like fate-y. Um, and I think the nodes feel fatey too. Um, and and so it's almost less of like figuring it out mentally and more just like allowing yourself to do the things you have to do, because that kind of pulls you along your storyline. And it's almost like with all of these south node eclipses, we're realizing that we're lost, and we're realizing why we're lost, but we still don't have a sense of where we're trying to go. And I think the north node can help us kind of pull us towards that place, and not so much in a Sagittarian way, not like here's my goal, here's where I'm going, but more in a Gemini way of like, one of my favorite kind of quotations from Alice in Wonderland: if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. Which is true, but you still have to try out a few. And right, Mercury in Gemini is, is the wayfinder, is the word weaver, right? And so much of our mental structures are built out of words. And it's kind of like Mercury in Gemini is like is like a giant game of dress up of who you could become, or like what you could try on, but in that spirited, childlike way. What else do I want to say about this eclipse? So starting new stories in Gemini land, and we really have 6 months of kind of planting those seeds and getting them, seeing what germinates. So, having lots of options, and then just seeing kind of where the chips fall, or, depends on where your Mars is and what your birth chart looks like, how active you're going to be in your life. If your life is more about making things happen, or integrating and accepting what does happen. So with this eclipse, what else do we have right on there? Well, so the other main aspect that this eclipse makes, besides being conjunct a retrograde Mercury, is that it squares Neptune. So there is this kind of confusion, but so Neptune can kind of provide the fog, and I think especially to mercurial beings such as ourselves, right? People with Virgo placements and Gemini placements, Neptune is kind of a malefic, and it's very confusing, and it makes things indistinct. But it can also provide kind of divine inspiration. So it can be very creative. And I think sometimes, I know I, with a little bit more of like a pessimistic Saturnian and Virgoan tone, rag on Neptune a little bit, while Neptune is like quietly watercoloring in the background of my life and making things beautiful. And I'm like, I can't see clearly. Why is everything so nice? So yeah, I think part of it is like accepting that we can't find our way all the way through, and getting curious about where we are, since we can't find the shortest distance to like where we're trying to go. Yeah. So I think that is a big piece, and largely what I want to say about the eclipses, right? This is the beginning of like the less serious work, right? Like we shouldn't do Gemini work with the spirit of Sagittarius, with the idea that we're going to master something, or we're going to find one answer. Gemini work is all about trying things out, not worrying about completing things, not worrying about the mastery, being more interested in the people that you meet, not worrying about meaning. Like, it's like, stop making meaning out of things. just be playful, right? Like we pulled down the structures of the world with the pandemic. Like we pulled down every day. We destroyed normal, right? And hopefully that led us to some greater sense of meaning in what we care about and what we value. And I think Uranus and Saturn are participants in that storyline, and they are going to perfect their second exact square just a couple days after the eclipse. So I definitely think that that's factoring into the vibe. But right, like we cannot approach everything with the spiritual warrior Sagittarius energy. I think we need to offer ourselves the space and the curiosity about what is possible, instead of thinking like, okay, everything changed and I understand the world and I know what's possible. And if I just believe it hard enough or force it on other people or force it on me, I can make this stuff happen. Right. Like I think what we've learned is that we need rest, we need balance, we need playfulness, we need social connection, in a lot of different ways. So yeah, I'm gonna help kind of lead us down the path,
Yeah,
via tarot
totally.
into the eclipse space.
Yeah, give me 1 second to get my stool up here.
Sure thing.
So I think, yeah, like I think trying to like combine the Virgo-ness and the Gemini-ness of mutability. I have a really quick reading in mind. I'm going to turn my video off just a second so that I can get up in place here. Let me see. Yes. Oh, that's still this way. Sorry. Okay. So I think I want to do a really quick spread. Hopefully this will translate. But you were talking a lot about like growth and like this tension between like the Sagittarian way of doing things and the Gemini way of doing things. And actually, I'm going to turn my camera back around for just a second. Sorry. I wonder if you could share really fast the quote that you have tattooed on your side.
Yeah. I'm not going to show people because it's my whole body.
Yeah,
but
no, just.
But the quotation that I have is from William Faulkner's book As I Lay Dying, and it says, "I feel like a wet seed, wild in the hot, blind earth."
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about that a lot while you were talking, because I think this past year has been a very disorienting time for everyone. And I think it challenges a lot of the stories that we have about ourselves as a society, and about like how we're supposed to function and what we're supposed to be doing. Yeah, and like the idea of Sagittarius being the archer and having a straight path. You said something about we don't always know like the clearest path. And so like I think part of the question of this eclipse cycle is reconciling the straight and narrow with kind of like exploration as growth. And so I'm going to do just a really quick reading of the soil and then the seed. And then I'll also have the sprout. And hopefully that will help us a little bit with this. And I'm not sure which way is down on this camera, but okay. The soil will be the high priestess, which is very funny because she's literally like associated with the moon, which is associated with the tide, which is associated with cycles. So growth is like very inherently tied to that like feminine energy. The high priestess as a card is physically representing, we have a female figure with the moon in her robes, which resemble the water. Again, the moon, the tide, cycles, but she's also seated in front of kind of this like doorway. So yeah, like she somewhat symbolically represents a vagina, right? The seed is in there. We have to like cultivate it. The earth has to be tilled. We have to like pull out what's dead in order to put something new there, which I think if you want to consider the soil as the south node, if Whitney's been talking about shedding the limiting beliefs, like part of growth is like the clearing away of where we plant the seed. So the seed that we're going to put in there is the 9 of Cups. So the 9 of Cups represents abundance and success and kind of like fulfillment spiritually and mastery over this like sometimes trying suit. The cups generally represent like spiritual fulfillment and like the soul's like well-being. So it's cool. I mean, personally, the eclipse cycle has like really been pushing me to question like what makes me feel most whole. So the idea that I'm planting seeds for myself of abundance is empowering, because it's like once I remove the expectation of myself that I'm supposed to make a lot of money or marry, you know, and have a house with a 2-car garage, once I kind of allow myself to open the idea of what abundance is to me, it changes the playing field a little bit. Is that down now? I realize I'm sideways for you. Okay. Yeah, so the seed we're planting is the 9 of Cups, which represents abundance, and the shadow side can be a little bit of like smugness. So it's good to have clarity, I think, on what we want out of abundance. So that's just something to keep in mind. And then, so when the seed sprouts, when it finds its way through the hot, wet earth, we have a reversed 6 of Cups. So that's a very fitting card, I think, in terms of like the discussion of, again, personally for me, a lot of like stories I've told myself from childhood and finding a way to kind of like set those free. Sorry, first of all, right side up, it shows 2 children with cups, and there's like flowers growing out of the cups. In general, this card is associated with like nostalgia and kind of like your inner child, basically. So the sprout of the 9 of Cups being a reversed 6 of Cups to me would signify kind of like a renaissance almost of your childhood, like finding a way to till the inner child in a way that's fruitful for like a renewed idea of abundance. I said I was only going to pull 3, but I kind of want to pull 1 for the rain, just so we have kind of an idea of like the challenges that we've been facing, especially with like the Neptunian fog. Like that sounds kind of like a relevant card to pull, which is the reversed sun, which makes perfect sense in a solar eclipse. Yeah, I mean, the sun, so in general, reverse cards are kind of like the shadow, or kind of like a literally reversed meaning of the card, but the sun is always a blessing. So having the sun reversed, I think, is kind of like in the dark night of the soul, like what kind of comes through. And I think having Mercury retrograde Kazimi during the eclipse is like really relevant to the sun being next to the reversed sun being next to the reversed 6 of Cups, right? Like we're looking for some clarity in terms of like what we're hoping to uproot from our psyches. And I think having the reversed sun kind of like brings a little bit of like juice, like God juice into into that work, because it's not always work you can see, right? It's something you kind of have to feel your way through. So just to bring it back to like the Sagittarian versus Gemini way of doing things, right? Like Sagittarius has to see what he's aiming at in order to let go of the arrow. But I think part of the gift of Gemini is like this expansive exploration and kind of feeling your way through what you can't see.
It's not goal oriented as much as process oriented.
Totally. And like I think part of why I chose the seed metaphor is that you were talking about the fadey feeling and how like some things just come up and we don't always expect them to come up. And so like a seed already contains what it's going to be, but it doesn't know that yet. And I think also part of this eclipse happening on a new moon is kind of like, it pulls back the reins a little bit on the cerebralness of Gemini in a way that like allows the seed to kind of do what it's already supposed to be doing. Like we're in the fertile earth, we're planted in the high priestess, and in that dark, like wet soil, we're given the opportunity to reflect on like what we want, right? Like the shedding of limiting beliefs you talked about in December. You can't just shed, right? When you molt your skin or your feathers, right, you have new ones sprouting. And so questioning what you want to plant in that void is kind of the work that we're being called to do, which is like not the most active, like you said, like we don't know exactly what we're chewing on intuitively.
Right. And it sounds like I'm hearing and kind of what you're saying, right? This kind of and then maybe in what I'm understanding of what you said of the reversed Six of Cups, how, right, there's newness coming in, but we're not approaching that newness from the space of Sagittarius, that it already has to be mature and that we already that we have to know what it's doing. It's really about like, right, like trust yourself, that the creative child within, like, right, like children don't think they're learning when they're learning, right? Like children play and they end up learning about the world, right? Like no child is like, okay, I'm 6 months old, time to begin like this phase of crawling so that later I can walk, so that later I can do this piece, right? So that maybe I'll be a soccer star at some point, right? Like it's, which almost sounds like Capricornian, right? No, it's just they're playing and they're engaging in the world around them, and in the process of doing that, they're learning what they need to know to be a participant in that world.
Yeah, which has been kind of the lesson of, I think, this whole pandemic experience is kind of taking your foot off of the gas and realizing that, like, I don't know, if you've ever been across black ice, like it's kind of this heart-stopping moment where you realize that you're not in total control the way that you think you are. And sometimes in those moments, like you react in pre-consciously, like before you have time to evaluate what you're reacting to, you're already reacting. And so kind of like, I guess what I'm trying to point to is like, there is this like essential self, and sometimes that self is wounded, but there are still like parts of us that know what to do in those moments. And so like finding a way to like pull back a little bit in order to let those parts of ourselves rise to the surface, I think will give you a little bit of clarity in terms of like where you're headed and what you're even reaching for, etc.
Right. Yeah, that makes me think about, right, that the quotation that the mind is a terrible servant and a terrible master and a wonderful servant.
What a Virgo way to say that.
Right. I know. What a Virgo Mercury retrograde way to say that. Right, but it's almost like at this juncture, you don't need the mind. You need the child to relearn the space of yourself and the space of the world around you. And that we really have, we're going to see this. I think another thing that's interesting about the eclipse is that by the time it culminates, so right, this is the Gemini new moon, and we'll have a Gemini full moon where we should see kind of the culmination, or just, where we get kind of the sense of how we're going to reap what we've sown during this time period. That Gemini full moon that happens a few days after Christmas, a few days before Christmas, is not eclipsed. So by the time we get to that Gemini full moon, we're out of the Gemini Sag eclipses. We'll have one more Sag eclipse that happens in December, but by then we will have started the Taurus Scorpio eclipse cycle. So really, it's not like, so what I'm saying is like, there's not some like huge grand finale, right? The projects of Gemini are not about like your life's work and like dominating your psyche with a single idea, right?
Yeah, it's playful, like you said.
Yeah.
It's more
It's
about
playful. It's not
exploring and
goal
learning.
oriented. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really like this kind of sense of like, it's process oriented. And I think the cards that you provided really like helped me kind of like diffuse some of the anxiety, right? Like trusting that the
Hmm.
soil is fertile, that what
Hmm.
we're planting into it is about abundance, and right, kind of trusting our intentions, but then staying present instead of like being like, these are my intentions and these are my goals. And what I'm going to put in the middle is like focused effort. It's like,
Right.
I trust that the world is good. I trust that I'm trying to do the right thing. And now what I'm going to do is try and play with it and learn from
Hmm.
it rather than
Feel
trying
around.
to master it or dominate it.
Yeah.
And same thing with my psyche, because guess what? What happens out here happens in here, vice versa. So thank you everyone for tuning in for this little chat about the coming Gemini eclipse. Emma and I are doing an event together. I'll put the link in the description below. We'll go more in depth in everything. She's going to do a different reading, and if you come, you will provide your birth info and we will integrate it into your charts, and there will be a place to kind of share your stories and kind of workshop that a little bit with us. Let me know if you like this this dynamic, and if you'd like to have Emma back on my YouTube channel. And
I would
yeah,
like to be back.
yes. Okay. I hope you all have a lovely eclipse. Remember, don't do your normal stuff on eclipses. Stay safe. Honor the wisdom that lives in you and the goodness that is in you. Be well.